those are going to be the ones that everybody uses because they're billions of dollars of money and billions of dollars of GPUs, and the rest of these neat little tools that I've been dabbling with for the last year because all of the developers are talking about, look at the search engine. It's so much better because it fills out the answers in AI. I'm like, all these things are going to be eaten by Google, Microsoft, and I'll throw Amazon in there just because. But I think we're distracted.
This is DevOps Paradox, episode number 281, The Impossibility of Competing with Tech Giants. Welcome to DevOps Paradox. This is a podcast about random stuff in which we, Darin and Viktor, pretend we know what we're talking about. Most of the time, we mask our ignorance by putting the word DevOps everywhere we can and mix it with random buzzwords like Kubernetes, serverless, CI/CD, team productivity, islands of happiness, and other fancy expressions that make us sound like we know what we're doing. Occasionally, we invite guests who do know something, but we do not do that often since they might make us look incompetent. The truth is out there, and there is no way we are going to find it. P.S. It's Darin reading this text and feeling embarrassed that Viktor made me do it. Here are your hosts, Darin Pope and Viktor Farsic.
This episode is what happens when two DevOps podcasts walk into a bar. On today's show, we have Viktor, as always. We also have Bret Fisher on, and we also have Nirmal Mehta on. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Where are the drinks? Yes.
Evidently, this didn't come with a bartender. Yeah, someone didn't schedule the bartender.
This is the worst bar I've been in so far. So keep going, Darin.
It's just because I'm the one running the bar, and I don't drink, so that's how it plays out today.
All right.
Here we go.
Mocktails only.
Mocktails only.
I've got labs tomorrow for my doctor, so I'm also not drinking today.
There you go.
Is he already out, or is he just going to get another drink? Oh, sorry. Okay.
He's probably getting another drink.
I came back because I'm a nice person, but normally my reaction when I hear mocktails is...
Goodbye.
Goodbye? Yeah. Goodbye. I'll send Darin later.
Okay, let's just go ahead and jump right in. AI, is it a thing or not?
Ooh. It's a thing.
It is a thing.
It is definitely a thing. And 99% of it is I cannot find a word that is not swearing. But there is 1% that is a thing. Yes.
Oh, that's a hedge. Why don't you just say 100% is not the thing? Commit.
Well, I mean, first of all, we've been using AI for a long time now. If you ever used Google Maps, you used AI, right?
Right.
It's just that now it's becoming more user-facing or more obvious, and that's awesome, right? I mean, I use what's the GitHub thingy? GitHub Copilot, right? All the time, and it's awesome. Not perfect, it's awesome. For each Copilot, there is 99 that I try or hear about and say, you got VC money. I understand that, and you will not exist in a couple of years.
Got it. Okay, that's where the 99% is coming from.
Yeah. Do you know that anyone know the .NET Rocks podcast? They've been around forever. Carl and
Richard.
Richard, thank you. See, that's why
That's my role today, is to fill in the blanks for everybody.
Wait, what's going on here? First we start with mocktails. Now we're going to .NET. What's next?
So these guys are great. I mean, I met them 15 years ago. I think they've been doing .NET. Like, they were doing podcasts back before Apple coined the term podcast. So they're OG podcasters. And I think it was Carl, maybe Richard, that said when we a couple of years ago, right when the ChatGPT was released, I think he had the best line ever, and it was, AI is what we call it until the feature gets a name. Is more or less how he said it. And I completely have felt like that was the thing. And since then, so far, I think it's all correct. Like, ChatGPT was the feature. We don't call it AI, we call it ChatGPT. It has a brand name. And everything else that I've seen, every other tool that I have that has AI as a feature in it, we're not calling it like it most of these things we won't even call AI in the future. 10 years from now, something else will be called AI, but these things will just be features, and we won't even think of it as AI. It's just what we call. I'm agreeing with them. It's just what we call the things we don't really have a good name for yet. Because they went back like 20 years when they stated that, and we're like explaining all the 20, 30 years ago, this is AI, this was AI, this was machine learning, and then, but we didn't call that, we didn't say that to the users because they wouldn't understand what that meant. So we just don't have a name for these things unless you want to just say ChatGPT. Because a lot of this other stuff, I mean, we felt like we had the two things, right? ChatGPT and then Stable Diffusion and the other, image automation or image generation. And those two things, I feel like you won't hear the word AI a lot probably in 5 years around Adobe Firefly or whatever. It'll just be
part of
an image generator with a chat element or something. And
so that's an interesting distinction that I think kind of gets at the heart of what both you and Victor were saying, is that AI, or these different tools or implementations of, like, explicitly for what we're talking about, like content generation tools, will become features of products and features of services. They are in themselves not the product necessarily. They are a product from a service provider perspective for the people that are using it to integrate, but that's at a lower level than like the customer facing. It's going to be a feature, kind of like what you were just saying about Google Maps. Like if you're using search or Google Maps or like a lot of examples, there's like a recommendation engine, or you've got your webcam up for your security system and it's doing face recognition. There is machine learning as part of as to support a feature, right? Like face recognition or translation, right? It's in support of a feature versus the product itself.
I feel that that's the big difference between now and not long ago, is that now we're having, both in terms of investment and actual products, the attempt to actually generate new products or new services that you haven't used before and convince you that you should use them. I feel that that's a fool's errand, that's going to fail miserably. The reason is very simple. Let's say that you write code, right? Where do you write code? Visual Studio Code?
Sure.
For example? Cool. Are you willing to go now outside to something else? Copy something from Visual Studio Code, go somewhere else, paste it there, get some information, copy it from there, and go back to Visual Studio Code?
Not likely. That's a lot of friction, unless it's like a massive value proposition. But
exactly. But even if it is a massive value proposition, it's not going to be for long, right? Because Visual Studio Code is not a great example because it already has Copilot, what's or not, right? Same thing. Let's say you use Photoshop, right? And you need to generate some background for your photo, right? You want it in Photoshop. You don't want to go somewhere else to Discourse, generate something, and then save it, and then open it in Photoshop, and then do whatever else you need to do, right? That's what I mean by they're trying to sell us now products, and actually we will go back to where we were, not exactly where we were, that those things will be becoming features. Maybe by purchasing those products and incorporating them, that might be the case. But it's going to go back to features for the majority of cases. I'm sure of that.
And I think we're in the Cambrian explosion time of this technology, where everyone is exploring the space of possibilities. And then, like you said, we'll get to a phase where it's going to be consolidation of the features that do provide value back into the products and services that we use. Or and 1% or 2% or whatever it is of that space that it gets explored might turn into actually full-on new products, because it is such a novel or innovative or new paradigm that we can't even think about now. But it's not going to be the majority. The majority is probably going to be just integrated as features and supporting productivity increases in some kind of way.
Yeah, it's funny. This is probably not a hot take, but I feel like within this could be like the shortest tech hype cycle we ever see. Like it could, like we're over, not even 2 years in, I feel like, and already like it sounds like VCs are exhausted, users are exhausted of the marketing, of the hype, of the overselling of things, and I think anyone who's ever dabbled with this technology, it's like our curiosity around having a thing put words in succession that sounds like a human wrote it. It's a neat trick. It's new. I mean, I remember when my email started recommending the next word, like that was a neat trick, and I really enjoyed it. And now this is finishing sentences, finishing paragraphs, and all that stuff. And I feel like the kids today are not even going to know that this was a different, like that we didn't have this before. It's just going to be there, built into everything. I fully expect within a few years, not all these AI tools that I'm using that are specifically called AI tools or whatever, like that I won't use any of them, and that every tool that I was using, TurboTax for my taxes, QuickBooks for my accounting, my VS Code, my browser, like all these things, they're just going to be features of all those things, and that none of these new products. The best I feel like most of these VCs or most of the startups around this area can hope for is they get bought by the big companies. But I don't know if anyone's really tracking this stuff, but I don't know if that's really happening. I think all the Microsofts, the Googles, and they're all like, they're not really buying the acqui-hires or anything like that. Maybe they're doing some of it. Maybe you're closer to that world, but I don't really hear a lot of that. And I'm just wondering if there's going to be a lot of wasted VC money on things that ultimately Claude and Bard and all these things, those are going to be the ones that everybody uses because they're billions of dollars of money and billions of dollars of GPUs, and the rest of these neat little tools that I've been dabbling with for the last year because all of the developers are talking about, look at the search engine. It's so much better because it fills out the answers in AI. I'm like, all these things are going to be eaten by Google, Microsoft, and I'll throw Amazon in there just because. But like I think we're distracted.
I think there's an inflection point. I think it's going to come faster because of iOS 18. We know that these features are integrated into our like in the next release of iOS 18, and that's likely going to be if you're just a normal person out there that has not doesn't know anything about OpenAI or has not used ChatGPT, and you've not touched any of these tools. Once the next version of iOS comes out with all these AI features integrated, that's going to be the first example or usage of these features for a large swath of people in the next few months, right? I don't know when iOS 18 drops, but like 3-4 months. And I think that's going to be what you're talking about, Bret, like the acceleration of that.
But none of those people are going to know it as AI.
Correct.
They're
well,
just
I mean,
know it
it's
as Apple.
They know,
features, right?
Yeah, they know it as AI because of Apple branding and marketing. But
yeah.
like, I agree. Like they'll know that this is like a feature or a new functionality that their phone is doing.
I mean, was Siri not AI? This is what's like the branding and all this stuff. What have we been using so far with Siri? Was it not AI? Was it just a script?
No, there was a bunch of people in their data center answering your questions. You did not notice that there is a slight difference in the intonation of
that
the
voice? There's
that
that 20-year-old skit of the person at Google that answers your questions. You ever? I think it was like a fourth, not a Fourth of July, a April Fool's joke. I think done by Google that was like, yeah, here's the person that answers all your Google queries.
Yeah. That being said, though, Bret, in terms of like the over the hype or over marketing of AI. Personally, I'm using these tools more and more as time goes on. So that being said, like I am finding more and more value coming out of these things. So regardless of the hype, true. Like that's just from a day to day, like I'm consuming those features more and more.
Here's the difference compared to other hypes is that all other hypes were based on a completely new category of products, right? Both of you were probably in DockerCon a long time ago when Kubernetes was announced and there was Nomad and Mesos and Tupperware and what's not, right? That was a hype. But it was a hype based on a new type of products, right? We did not have such things before, right?
Right.
Or, I don't know, electric cars, again, something different, something new. Or any other, even blockchain, even though it failed miserably, right? It was okay. So it's a new thing, and we have digital currency, right? There is no new product that I'm aware of in AI right now. That's the problem, right? That it's not that Amazon and Microsoft are going to absorb all of them. They're simply going to absorb few of them, and the rest is going to disappear simply because they have no product. You cannot compete with Photoshop. You cannot say, I'm going to take away Photoshop market. I'm going to do the same thing as they do, right? You cannot do that. You need something new. And what's that new thing?
I think it's too early to tell. I think the current iteration is features, but I think we're too early. There's some bets on that.
Yeah, you could argue that just simply chatting with typing a question and getting a response in human readable format is just a feature, and it could be a feature on every. And I think we were saying this on the show earlier this year on our show that it's just going to end up where every single tool I'm already using, which has already started to happen. Notion has it. I use Arc browser. Arc has AI features, or I should say, generative text and generative image features. These are all getting added to all the products we already use and love, and they're to me, it's almost like just two real features: images and text. What I'm more interested in is how these companies, like certain companies, are taking an AI and turning it into a feature that isn't a prompt. Like my Arc browser looks inside either the web page or the file it's downloading and then renames the file when it finishes downloading to be more appropriate to what the file is. I love that thing. It gets it right 99% of the time. And I can't tell you, I'm just thinking for the last 30 years, I've been renaming downloaded files every day of my life, ever since I could download things from the internet. And now I don't rename any of them because it gets it pretty good.
Right, but that's a feature.
That's a feature. They call it AI. I don't know what is AI about it other than it just reads and interprets, right? So it's probably throwing it through the LLM and turning it into text and then getting a response from that. But it's got, Arc and other browsers are all experimenting with this stuff too, but they've kind of got this list of features. And I go through that list and I'm like, yeah, you could say these are AI, but really to any normal person, they're just going to be features. They're just features, and they're slick looking things that, it renames tab titles for me to what that web page actually is versus what the web page title says it is. It's just little stuff like that.
Here's a product area. Maybe it's a product area. I'd like to posit this to the group. Maybe going down one layer from the implementation of these features and the usage of these features that are enabled by these large language models and these other new models, the architectural pattern of using these models with something like RAG or with fine-tuning a model with your own data sources, is that a product? Like the frameworks and the processes and the tooling to enable that? Would you call that a product?
I would, but that's what Azure is doing. Ignoring now how successful and unsuccessful. If you go to Azure OpenAI, you get ChatGPT essentially, plus your data. Or only your data, whatever you choose, right?
Right. So to answer your question, you don't see a new product. Maybe the actual new product category is that layer, one layer down from what we're using. And it's just enabling all these new features that are integrated into these products, right? It's the architecture solution to deliver.
You're onto something, because I think that you said earlier that you're using some application for finances, right? I forgot whatever it was.
Oh, QuickBooks, yeah.
Right. That's probably, those types of areas can be disrupted with AI, right? Something that is less common, less popular, maybe something in medicine, right? Something that is not used by masses, because masses are controlled already by Google and Apple and what's not, right? But yeah, you could probably make business by replacing financial applications. Yes, you will not get millions of users, but that could be something, right?
Yeah, and I think that's what I meant, that it's kind of a little bit too early to tell that there's no product category yet, because I think there's another layer or another area that is enabled by the architectures that were created to train and do the inference and all this other non-training features or functionality. Those enable they're potentially going to enable another product category in specific niches. So maybe like protein folding or like large data analysis of, I don't know, like climate data or something. I don't know.
You're getting at the idea that like all of these different variations, and I can sit here and list like a dozen of them, where it's really, we're talking about like data intelligence. I mean, I'm trying to think of BI already, Microsoft and Azure have been BI for decades. Like I used to work with a company that was all about BI and business intelligence, I should say, for those the uninitiated. That was all very proprietary, specialized tools that were offered to businesses for a premium. And what I'm seeing now, like I'm playing around with Kappa AI, which is just a startup that's throwing an easy way to throw RAG or your data on top of an existing LLM that they made, or they're maybe using their own, maybe they're using OpenAI's, and you can just ask questions of your data. And I'm already seeing that pop up in all the tools I use. So like Notion, I pay extra, and I can now ask it questions about the massive amount, the thousands of pages of data that my company has put into our Notion, everything about every live show, every guest we've had, every course video I've made, it's all in there. And now I can just ask questions.
But that's a feature, though. That's not a
That's a feature.
BI has been around.
What's that?
BI has been around for a while, so that's not a new product.
Right. That's why I wasn't wanting to call it BI or business intelligence. I wanted to, maybe it's just data intelligence as a general feature of the entire, every place I put data, I feel like I'm now going to get either an additional benefit for free, or they're going to ask me if I want to pay to have the ability to chat with my data. And there's like a half a dozen or so startups that are just like Kappa's thing is that they provide a bunch of plugins so that you can interact with your data. You can give them your data in a specific format. They ingest it. They use OpenAI on the back end. And then they give you a bunch of plugins so that you can ask questions of that data from Slack, from Discord, from Teams, from wherever you prefer to chat with your AI in a community of your colleagues or whatever, right? And there's a bunch of other ones like that are just doing that. And really all they are is just an LLM with a RAG on top and a fancy GUI layer. So I feel like at some point, those are all going to go away, and we're really just going to have all the tools we already use that actually deliver real value in other places, and that it creates data. And then these tools just either we have to pay extra or they just become a feature of them to ask questions of our data and have a conversation about the data. We're all used to searching. Like in Slack, if you think about it, in Slack, I can search Slack and find messages. But what if I could just, it's probably already a thing in Slack and I'm not paying attention. But if I expect at some point I'll just be able to I'll ask a question in English format instead of using their specialized syntax with a colon or an equal sign or whatever. But I can just say, hey, just show me all the messages that Bret mentioned, Docker files in relation to using them with a compose file and whatever. And then I will get back, instead of it just showing me the results, which is like a search engine, right? We're seeing this with Google where they're taking the search results, they're turning it into a human answer and not even letting you go to the web page. I'm not even going to go down that road of like licensing data and stealing content and all that stuff. But I just feel like even my notepad is probably at some point going to just allow me to ask questions about all the notes that I've ever written in it. And it will just tell me in a new format instead of just saying, here's where all those files live on your computer because I searched it and indexed it, and here's the locations. Go read them yourselves. It'll just pull all that out and tell me the answers without me having to actually research on my own.
The way how I interpret what you just said reminds me a lot of the current situation of cloud. In terms that we are at a point where nobody can compete by creating a service that simply runs on AWS, right? Or Microsoft or Google, simply because sooner or later those are going to be absorbed by
right.
But where you can have success is if you go beyond a single provider and say, you know what? I know that AWS is not interested in what they do in Google and vice versa. If I have a service that somehow does something across multiple clouds, I stand a chance, right? A chance. I'm not saying successful.
No. I actually just I know we've had conversations about this for almost a decade, Victor, and I might be biased, but I think there is so much untapped surface area in terms of niches or even just full-on industry that service providers are likely won't get to.
Here's a question for you. Any of the other three, any of you can answer it. Which company, I'm going to ask two questions. Which CNCF cloud-like company went IPO so far, and which one you think will go IPO? The first answer to the first question is very easy.
Sorry, the question is which
Like
cloud
CNCF like company, cloud, Kubernetes type of company went IPO so far.
So like things that are on the cloud native landscape.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know.
HashiCorp?
If you count HashiCorp in that group, that's the only one. And we can have a debate whether that's that group or no, right? And if you go to KubeCon and look at the expo, how many companies are going to go IPO? Don't know, of course, but very few, if any, right? So
is IPO the only measure of success?
Given that they're all financed by VCs, IPO or being bought by somebody is the only. Right. So kind of you becoming profitable, you cannot just say I'm profitable. Kind of like that will never return the investment to VCs, multiplied, right? So if those companies will be financed differently, I would say yes, there are other ways to do that. But with the current climate, how it works, it needs to be IPO or be purchased by somebody, right?
Are we changing subjects, or are you tying this into the AI talk?
We changed the subject, but I can tie that to the AI.
Okay.
I think it will be a very similar situation because AI is even worse. AI is expensive, kind of like excluding companies that do AI by sending CURL requests to ChatGPT. I'm excluding those, kind of like that anybody can do that. That's a very expensive thing, right? A lot of money is going to be invested there, and it also is already invested and will continue. We're going to continue seeing huge investments. And that means that those companies need to be purchased for a significant amount of money or go IPO.
On this topic, have you, in the IPO game, I am largely ignorant in terms of like motivations, who's next, what their money situation is to motivate them for that. But the programmatic engineer, or pragmatic, sorry, I always get that wrong. The pragmatic engineer newsletter on Substack, it's a wonderful newsletter. Gurgley's great. Did I say his name? I'm hopefully not getting that wrong. He talks about the I don't know if any of you watch that or read that newsletter, but it's like journalism quality writing around tech stuff. And there's been like a 3-part or 2-part series on the end of zero interest rates and what that means for VCs. And I thought it was like, I don't care about this. I'm not going to read it. And then I actually read it, and I was forever changed by the idea that in a climate where money is not free, and today I could go get a savings account that gives me over 5% interest, no risk, right? No downside. And he makes the case for like, in our current climate, VCs are pulling back, and there's not a lot of motivation for random. I don't have to put in $50 million if I need to make back $100 million in a decade or $75 million in the next decade, because I can just do that with a bank account with interest as long as I have it. And how that the rush in the pandemic era to all these VCs, and I mean, a lot of what Nirmal and I are having on the show is a lot of these cloud native startups that didn't exist 3-4 years ago, and maybe they did, but they were sort of in pre-launch mode, didn't really have anything for us to look at. And we're having a lot of those people on the show, and they're all kind of filling in the same gaps, right? CI tools, dev workflow tools, things that operationalize things or make it easier for devs to manage infrastructure and builds and deployments and all that. So it all seems to be very, and dev environments is just one of those where it's like we have a new one on every month. And I have to wonder if, and some of them are cool, like I'm not knocking them all, but I have to wonder if, now that we've had a couple of years of higher interest rates, if all of that's like, I'm not paying attention to the rate at which VCs are funding these little startups coming out of Y Combinator and whatnot. But my based on that reading, my assumption is it's all declined because the VCs don't have to risk so much of their money anymore to make a profit because they can just go to the market for, bonds. They can buy bonds, they can buy funds and savings accounts and stuff.
For the type of companies you mentioned, actually, there are two problems, not one. First, interest rates that make VCs less likely to invest in what's or not. But second is that if they're going to invest into something today, they're not going to invest into development environments. They're going to invest into AI.
Right.
That's where the investment goes.
Right. And also there's, just to counter the return, there's a lot of built up cash that's been waiting to find something that will have a potential for free cash flow in the future, right? Or growth. There aren't many other, you can say it's hype, and you can say that 99% is not going to turn out to be something, but what other bets are out there, right? Right? And so it might also be just there's no alternative. And I get what you're saying, Bret, about the alternative is that 5% or, market returns, but to get the 100x or 1000x growth bet or return bet, what markets are out there? So from that kind of perspective, Viktor, it's probably not a bad bet in the sense that, you're expecting 1 out of 100 or 1 out of 1% to actually hit and find a new product category, right?
I mean, there will be, what I'm sure, even though I said that 99% will disappear, years from now, there will be one big player that was born now from this hype.
Yeah, and maybe some new new categories that we don't even know about yet. We're just super in the exploration phase right now. Everyone is just running experiments, right? VC-backed experiments, essentially. And it is expensive, but there's a lot of different layers to it too. That's what I was kind of thinking about. Maybe the end user end user experience is a feature, but the other layer is maybe a new product category, right? The frameworks and the architectures to do these complex inference jobs or combining data in specific ways. And there's new products in terms of for folks that are training models and doing machine learning. Yeah, that might be a more limited customer base, but I think I was reading an article about, because some of this, the need for GPUs, and there's some, not everyone can find those or get access to that, or it's expensive. That means that there's another space of being able to use your existing hardware, everything from Raspberry Pis up to old laptops, to kind of the RAID of machine learning, right? Just kind of trying to scale out and use existing hardware. There's
a lot
of
SETI. It's like that SETI screensaver.
Well, yeah, but I mean, in the sense of because there's some silver lining. If Viktor, if you're saying all this kind of money spent is kind of maybe not wasted, but it might be a fool's errand in your mind, there are a lot of silver linings that kind of come out of that investment, right?
I'm perfectly aware that investments in hypes like this are counting to get 1 out of 100, right? So I'm not denying that. That's why I said 99, kind of
Yeah.
There will be ones in this game. Just it will be 1%, 2%, 3%, maybe 5%, right? But not 50%. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, no. I think you've made me come around to that. So yeah, potentially.
So getting back, sorry, can I change? I'm not going to change the topic, but I'm going to ask a question real quick. Back on the AI thing, can we go around the room? What is your favorite 1 or 2 tools that we're saying have AI features? I'm just curious because people are always asking, what are you using? And it's kind of like asking people, what's your dev stack? What tools you use there? But I'm just curious if anybody has a favorite. I think that it's acceptable to just say ChatGPT. I'm not shaming anything for anything not prepared or fancy, but I was just curious if people. I'll just throw mine out there. Arc browser, which I already said, and Notion. Those are probably besides this a typical code completion tool. Those are the two that save me time, help me stop searching and researching and rereading all my own stuff to find what I'm looking for, and then just save me little seconds a day on various tasking that I don't find it to be magical. Like, I don't want to chat with everything in my life. Like,
yeah. Victor?
In my case, it's too. I use Copilot all the time. I think it's such an improvement when compared to Stack Overflow, right?
Okay, so I was going to say, are you talking about Microsoft Copilot or GitHub Copilot?
Is there a Microsoft Copilot? No, I'm talking about GitHub Copilot.
Okay.
The
coding.
as a VS Code extension, essentially, right? Coding thingy. And the other thing that I use is Azure OpenAI, which is essentially ChatGPT through Fabric.
Interesting. So kind of
Fabric
integration.
Have you tried Fabric? Fabric is just kind of elaborated prompts that produce better results.
I'm not going to answer with an exact product here or feature.
No, not allowed. We all answered directly.
So, okay.
Come on.
All right. So I'm exploring and I'm enjoying GPT script, but it's mostly about the idea behind it, which is connecting these LLMs to agents that can do actions on my behalf.
Is there an analogy? I was like wondering if you, because I've read into it and I really don't understand like what it does.
Yeah, I mean, we'll do a show about it.
I've asked them to be on the show and they're just not responding.
Yeah, no. So I think the idea is that like right now we're kind of interfacing. Like, I'm talking about LLMs here, right? So we do use ChatGPT. We're interfacing with ChatGPT, and if you like, for example, I had a data file. I had data in a specific format and I needed to get it into another format. And I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know what, like, I didn't know how to program a program to do that conversion. So I uploaded it to ChatGPT and I asked it, please take this data and reformat it. And when you do that, it opens up a little window, like a sub window. I don't know if you've ever done this, and it'll show you like a Python script, maybe. It chooses Python, and it'll write a Python script that's doing something to that data, and then it runs that.
Oh, it runs on their servers, not
it
on
runs
your
on
machine.
it runs on their servers,
Oh, my.
and then the data comes out in the new format. So that is an example of that, like that script running on ChatGPT's, in this example, it's an agent pattern, right? So like the product ChatGPT in this case spins up and does actions on my behalf, right? Like it runs code that it itself created. And so GPT script is similar, where in GPT script you tell it, like you say, hey, I have SSH and I have LS and I have the copy command, and these are the tools that you're allowed to use. Now I'm going to ask you a question, or I'm going to tell you something I vaguely want to have done, like, can you make sure that this piece of data is on this server somewhere? And it will look at its toolbox and choose, okay, I need SSH, I need LS, I need CP, and it then executes those tools without me telling it what to do. So both the meta level of like choosing, like constructing the process that it's going to take to accomplish that task, and then also executing those tasks is done by GPT script in this other example. That's the pattern that I get excited about. It's like combining the interface and the LLM capabilities with agents and tools, and like allowing it to just execute that stuff on my behalf. And it seems very scary, and it probably is, but there's a lot of power there, right? Like
it sounds like it's not, the analogy I would have to give you. It sounds like it's like the AI version of if this then that. Would you agree with that?
No. So I mean, it's kind of like a layer above that, right? So in a rules engine, which is what you're describing, which is a version of AI, right? That's if then and if this then that. In this case, the prompt might be, I think in the example website, if you pull up GPT script, it's like, here's some data. I want to know the answer to this question. And you're just in a Linux terminal. And you tell GPT script, okay, you have access to shell, you have access to bash, and you have access to Python. And it will go, okay, I have the data file. I need to spin up a little SQL server or SQLite instance. So it writes a bash script to download and install and run SQLite, loads the data in there, and then it comes up with a SQL query to query that data store that it came up with and executed, and then it executes that query and then returns an answer. And the only thing you gave it was, these are the tools that you have access to, and this is the question I want answered. That's pretty wild.
That reminds me a lot of Rabbit. You know that device? Basically,
Yeah.
they were ignoring now that they were faking it and stuff like that. Ignore it for a second. But that was a premise, kind of, hey, you want to order Uber? We have actually action model that will go and do whatever needs to be done in Uber on our servers, something, and your car will come, right?
Yeah.
I'm not
And
saying
so-
it's the same, but and that feels so much more useful, to be honest, than chat. Right?
Right.
If I
So
could, if
chat
I could
is
have
just
a
the
mechanism
interface.
to say, hey,
Correct.
do this and that, machines are here, kind of like,
Yeah,
these are
absolutely.
here's my laptop, whatever, do the stuff.
Yes.
Then we're
and
talking.
That's what I mean.
Then we're talking.
That's what I'm excited about. It is that pattern of, like, when I was using ChatGPT to do this data conversion, I didn't know the format that my data came in, and I vaguely knew the extension of the format I wanted the data in. That's all I knew. And it figured everything else out, right? It chose Python, it wrote a Python script, it executed that Python script, and it outputted a file in that format. I don't know about you, but like, that's a massive productivity gain for me.
Yeah, and that's why I was saying it feels like it's a little bit like if this then that, only because I'm going to make the analogy connection there and try to see if I can't win you over. Like if I'm looking at the blog announcing GPT script, and it has a line that shows you list the tools, and they have one tools listed there as HTML to text. So it's going to take HTML on the internet and it's going to turn it into text, and then that text is inputted into the GPT script so that it can use its whatever LLM backend it's got. I don't even know. Like, and it turns and the one line of the tool it's only using one tool, and then it says, "Can you read this URL?" So the prompt below that is, "Can you read this URL from GitHub?" and which is a README, and then write an announcement blog for GPT script from this README of the GPT script project. And that, if I pull that out and like think of Zapier, which I use a lot, that workflow feels familiar to me because in Zapier, I have to always think context or tool, figure out what term you want to use. And so I'm like, I want every time I make a blog post for it to be posted in Discord. And so it's a very simplistic thing, but I have to go in and pick the tool, which is my blog. So I have to make sure that it supports my blog or RSS or whatever. And then that's a thing that Zapier built, or if this and that built. And then I have to go through its list of things it can do with that data, which means they already had to program that tool to know what possible outcomes could you have, which is inherently part of the limiting challenge of all those tools, is they keep having to add all of these specific actions. And it always seems like the action I want to do isn't in the list.
Of course.
And it drives me crazy.
And you have to wait for them to update
why am I
it.
paying for this?
Yeah.
What's that?
And you have to wait
Yeah.
for them to update it. But
Yeah,
It's
like I have to put in a request.
so this is like even
This feels
one
open-ended.
More, yeah, it's
Like-
open-ended. Like a version of this with respect to workflow would be, you don't even connect the tools together. You just give it a list of the tools that are available, and then you let it figure out what it thinks it's gonna thinks. Of course, I just
Right.
anthropomorphized it, but
Yeah, and I
it
was gonna
will
say, I
make a
don't know that-
decision about what tools to use to accomplish that goal, and it's up to you to verify, trust and verify whether it's, and that's where this stuff gets murky. But if you extend what we have today out 2-3 years of improvements, I don't know, we're probably going to get pretty confident in these tools if we're not already there. So the idea here is that the pattern of this agent doing, it's able to do actions on your behalf with whatever tools you're letting it do. Plus, it's also composing these tools together in whatever way it thinks, again, anthropomorphizing it, but whatever way it determines to compose these tools together, right? Like in that prompt for the SQL query, you're not saying, please use bash first to figure out, and then set up, like you're not giving it the instructions. Right. And the process.
That's step by step.
It's composing it itself, and that composability, and so it's the.
Is this declarative AI or imperative AI?
It's imperative. Like it's yeah. It's actually like a very open-ended reconciliation loop, right? Kind of thing. Anyways, I think that's very interesting. Like I think that's a very interesting pattern.
The last thing I'll try to say, because I know we're running out of time, but on the show, when I get in the AI rant moment, which I've had multiple of those with Nirmal having to sit there and just be silent while I wish for the future, and I'm throwing out into the ether the ideas that I want some AI company to create, it sounds like this might be a potential for me. GPT Script from Acorn, by the way, is what we've been talking about for the last 10 minutes. Previously, 2 founders of Rancher that were bought by SUSE, and now they're on Acorn. Is like, for example, I want to take a page I wrote in Notion and I want it to become a PR on a README in GitHub. The amount of work I have to do, copy, paste, fill out description. I mean, there's a lot. There's 10 minutes of work there that a bot could probably do in 20 seconds or 10 seconds or 5 seconds or something. And it feels like this is the kind of thing. Of course, it's going to have access to my machine, right? It's going to have be able to access. Not all these things will be API available. But you and I talk about on the show where I'm like, I want the thing when I want to create a new project, and this just happened last week. Got a new idea for a little tool I want just to solve a problem. I'm probably going to have Copilot create it and go, but I've got to create a repo. I've got to create a GitHub action to build it into an image. I've got to do all these boilerplate things. I've got to clone it locally. I've got to add a Docker ignore, a Git ignore, editor config file, like you name it, via a dev containers thing. I got to do all these things, and it's boilerplate. It's all boilerplate. And I probably have it in a repo as an example somewhere that I'm not using. And why can't AI just do all that for me with a request of, please create me a project? I just describe what I want, not the code, but all the other tools that are around the code. That is really sometimes what I waste all my time on. Then it sounds like if this thing can actually write to a file system, if it can actually talk to APIs and access the internet like it's a browser client or something like that. That is exciting. That is actually pretty cool. It sounds like it's closer than anything that I've seen to being able to allow me to automate local tasks.
Yeah, that pattern. I like that. That's why I was saying, like, I don't know if I can choose like a product or a feature, but the pattern of this agents, like it's being able to take action. That's interesting to me.
My 2 tools, since you guys left me out, which is fine. I've just been here taking a nap. No big deal. Fabric and Descript, because I use Descript for all the editing and stuff. It makes my life tons easier.
Yeah, Bret keeps threatening to replace me with like a Descript model, probably.
It's not that hard.
Yeah. I know.
So anyway,
Fabric. Sorry, what's Fabric?
So Fabric is much like GPT Script. Fabric has, Victor, correct me, prompts that are already fully baked. So it's great for summarizations. Like feed it a bunch of text, it will write breakdowns of summaries, references, it will figure out. So take a preacher doing a sermon. It'll take that, process it all, pull out all the references. Here's some takeaways, blah, blah, blah. I do that for a friend, and he's like, this is great. This saves me a lot of time after the fact because they're cutting up for social media and all that other kind of stuff. So, no big deal. But being able to analyze, we're talking about making money, 8Ks or 10Qs or any of the other things. There was just a new model or they call it a pattern, Fabric pattern, get it? There's a lot of sewing basis in Fabric. So once you start seeing it, all of that will make sense.
Okay.
Fabric is cool. What I'm trying after you all went on the rant about GPT script. Now I'm trying to figure out, okay, how can I turn Fabric into a tool within GPT script?
Yeah, there you go. See, and that's that composability. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So anyway, Bret called it out right. We are close to time here. If you want to hear more from Bret and Nirmal, check out Bret's YouTube channel, because Nirmal's not good enough to be on the name of the channel.
Correct.
It's Bret Fisher, Docker, and DevOps. And normally you have a live show on Thursdays around, I believe, noon or 1 Eastern, depending. Yeah. I'm assuming when you're around. You're sort of like us. We sometimes have something on Fridays when we're around. Is it the same thing for you? When you're around on Thursday, you'll do it?
It's about I would say it's like 50 out of 52 weeks a year. Like I did one on holiday. I did one on 4th of July in the U.S. Like I'm pretty dedicated. Like my whole setup is portable, so I do it from anywhere. So I meant for it to be reliable, but hey, it may not always be reliable. But
I think it's been
Thursdays.
very consistent, Bret. Let's give props where props are due. You've kept a very consistent schedule. The July 4th episode was a lot of fun.
Did you blow anything up?
No.
My video feed.
Afterwards.
My video feed. But yeah, it's Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern. And sometimes you'll see me there.
And sometimes we won't.
Yeah, he wasn't there today, but he'll be there soon.
Yeah.
He's busy at AWS. They got him. They actually make him work. So unfortunate.
How dare they? I don't understand why. Anyway, all of Bret's and Nirmal's contact information will be down in the episode description. Guys, thanks for being with us today.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
We hope this episode was helpful to you. If you want to discuss it or ask a question, please reach out to us. Our contact information and a link to the Slack workspace are at devopsparadox.com/contact. If you subscribe through Apple Podcast, be sure to leave us a review there. That helps other people discover this podcast. Go sign up right now at devopsparadox.com to receive an email whenever we drop the latest episode. Thank you for listening to DevOps Paradox.